I think what both of you are doing is sort of, creating a space for people to kind of come up with a lot of research and R&D, especially Paras, you at LossFunk. So I want to begin by, if Paras, you can just talk a bit about what you're doing post, Wingify. But before that, actually, I want you to talk a bit about what software is going through right now with the advent of AI, and we've seen how it's been decimated, at least in the markets. So do you think it was the right time for you to sell Wingify? And
I mean, I'm still a minority shareholder, and of course, I'm rooting for the company I started.
I'm sure.
But I do think software is going through like a big change. When I started in 2010, I remember plugging into my ID all day, all night long, churning out thousands and tens of thousands of lines of code of PHP and JavaScript, and that was hard to do. There was no auto completion also back day, so you had to write all the code yourself, and I think that's where the value got created. So in business, the fundamental law of value is that you need to be differentiated, and to be differentiated you need to do something which is extremely hard. And of course with software now, software only sort of startups, which was the whole poster child of India, which was SaaS, I think that advantage is just rapidly going away. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I prompt something in Cloud Code, and within 30 minutes, I have something which I can use. And I know a lot of people dismiss vibe coding as something which is hard to maintain, and it's sort of demos and so on and so forth. But models are just going to get better every single month. So fast forward in 2027, you'll have even better, fully functional software that's being churned out just through prompts. So yeah, software only companies, unless there is an attached, messy, boring, unsexy, hard element attached to it, I think that value is probably just rapidly eroding.
But what do you make of the reaction in the markets? Do you think it's a little exaggerated, or do you think, I mean, since you're still a shareholder, like you mentioned at Wingify, how do you kind of, people have two theories that, there will be far more productivity and, people will go through this transition, but sort of emerge stronger. How are you looking at somebody who's not actively involved in running Wingify, but you would obviously have an overarching view on it?
I think my sort of take is that companies that have already sort of gone and had the escape velocity and had some sort of scale, they're going to be fine for the coming period, because there's a lot of brand equity. There's a lot of messy. I mean, Wingify, we've done like a lot of messy work over the last 15 years of those tiny little integrations, those edge cases, and this extremely small things that add up over a period of 15 years, and replicating that overnight is going to be tough. But for startups or new companies where they don't have a lot of history going, if they're just building like a software startup, I think that is relatively easy to replicate now. So I'm much more optimistic about companies that have scale, that they're going to be around, than I'm optimistic about software startups. That I don't know how they're going to get that escape velocity.
Where is Wingify?
I think we're relatively scaled up. We are one of the market leaders in A/B testing, and yeah, I'm sort of optimistic about the company.
Peeyush, you want to come in and talk a bit about, your experience having been in Google, which is, obviously at the forefront right now in various layers of artificial intelligence. And how are you sort of looking at, companies that you are incubating at Meraki, and how prepared are they for, the next, 2 to 3 years? I mean, that seems like a very long period in what changes literally every few weeks.
Yeah, I think there has been no better time to do a startup, or I will even say a software startup. What it means to do a software startup will change, and I completely agree with Paras that you have to deal with messy problems. The bloodbath we are seeing is when people start resting on their laurels, having dealt with what were prior messy problems, and saying, all right, we will continue to capture rent. Well, guess what? Those problems are not that messy anymore. The new wave of technology has made them relatively trivial. You got to go reinvent yourself. But when a startup is starting today, it does not have that problem. And this is not something new. This has happened in multiple waves in our history. There was a time there were no computers, and there were humans in the room who were called computers, who would do the mathematics for you. And when something like that used to happen, the computers came around. Well, that industry, whoever was placing those humans, that went away. But guess what happened? Everything got better. Then there were mainframes. When personal computers came, same thing happened. When mobile came, with everything, people who were resting on their laurels disappeared. And you can go back and see so many companies which actually suffered. So I would say this is nothing different. Now you can write software if you know English. There was a time you could not write software unless you knew assembly language. So if anything, if you have imagination, if you understand a problem domain, what is happening is between imagination and reality, instantiation of the solution, that gap has really shortened. You don't have to be a world-class classic software engineer to give your idea birth. And that, I think, is an enabling thing for new startups. So I think there's been no better time.
So, Paras, just talk a bit about LossFunk and what you're trying to do there. We were discussing it's sort of, you're working with really young students. Tell us a bit about, what are the kind of things you're seeing, in terms of ideas, in terms of, where does the next innovation sort of come in India specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, this is what we were talking about backstage, that I mean, innovation doesn't happen magically. I think it's a function of decades of investment, decades of culture building. And why did, let's say, ChatGPT, LLMs happen in US and not anywhere else?
Exactly.
Because the whole history of Stanford, MIT, that culture that's happened, the whole investment that's happened, I think it's been sort of happening for decades there. And similarly in China, but you compare sort of India's R&D, I think it's 0.5% versus China's 5%, and US also 3% or 4%. And this is percentage of GDP. On absolute scales, it's even massive. So when we talk about innovation in India, I don't think it'll just magically change. You can't just have like a wand and say, we'll have more Nobel Prize winners, we'll have more papers in NeurIPS, etc. So in my very small, humble way, I'm trying to sort of say somebody's got to do it. And LossFunk is trying to take that step zero, where you try to build like a culture of research, foundational research in India. So right now at LossFunk, we have around, let's say, 20 researchers, some undergrads, some people who've quit their jobs and now doing research full time. And we're asking very, very foundational questions. So we're not building models. I think one thing that I wish more people realize, that models are a lagging indicator of years and decades of research that went nowhere. OpenAI, DeepMind, a lot of these companies were just tumbling around and doing things for many, many years, not producing anything worth of value before they stumble upon something. So to ask where would the next ChatGPT would come from, you can't just simply replicate what's already there and say that this is what we're going to do. You have to just start very, very orthogonal and do things which are very exploratory in nature. That's what we are doing at LossFunk right now. We are sort of asking these questions that might seem have no practical utility. For example, what's the relationship between consciousness and intelligence? What's the relationship between language and intelligence? What does the future of science look like? Can you automate it? So a lot of these questions are very foundational, and we end up sort of working on them. And that's the beauty of science also. Science works in this anonymous peer review. So when you submit a paper, nobody knows whether you are Yoshua Bengio or you are some hotshot professor, or whether you are like an undergrad working on producing a paper. It's all anonymous. And over the last 1 year, we've ended up writing around 10 to 12 papers that have gotten accepted in AI, IIII, NeurIPS, ICLR, etc. So I'm very optimistic about the talent we have. We just need someone to provide them like a playground and build the right culture for that research to come out.
Where do you think India is in terms of building a sovereign AI frontier model? Is that, is that at all possible, or, we are too late?
I think it depends on what you define as frontier. We definitely are developing sovereign models.
Much smaller, right? I mean, I'm talking about an OpenAI or a Gemini or an Anthropic.
I don't think we're anywhere near it, and I think everyone knows it. Just purely from a point of view of, you see in the US, they have around 40 or 50 million H100 equivalent GPUs. And I think entire India probably has 60,000, 50,000. So it's like several, maybe 1,000 orders of magnitude difference of compute capacity that we have. And in the current paradigm where you need lots of compute to train these big models, where is that training coming from? And how would you even do it theoretically?
So, I mean, we go back to the same question. I mean, Peeyush, and maybe you can talk a bit about it. How do we solve for these issues? I mean, obviously, Paras is doing his bit, but like he said, you don't know. This can take 10 years for you to have a breakout sort of product coming out. Talent is a problem. There's obviously very little R&D which happens across universities. Capital is the biggest issue here. So, I mean, where do you think, India kind of stands among all of these stacks in the AI space?
Yeah, I think it definitely is a challenge, especially when you look at where the leaders in the world are and where things are in India right now. But I think if we did two things, it will work very well. And I feel it's happening, but it's not comparable immediately. One is having the long-term vision that yes, we are not there yet, but we will get there. The models today are not as large or as capable, but they have their own shortcomings, and we will be able to build things which actually will be more relevant for India. And that is the start. That's how you go down the learning curve. That's how you actually figure out how do you get a crop of scientists who know how to train models and keep them stable as the number of parameters goes up or amount of training data or the situation happens. But that does not mean that on day one, you will become that great. But at the same time, with the long arc, you also play to where your strengths are. This is what we are trying to do with Fermi, for example, in Meraki Labs. And this is what I've always maintained, that the easiest way to do this is treat AI as a level playing field. It is a road roller which is coming and flattening everybody. Now, who can handle a messy problem, as Paras was saying, who can handle a messy problem in the most creative, most imaginative way, and then go rush to market, get a lot of people to use it. So I'll give you an example. India is the largest market for education in the world. It's not surprising. America is largest per head, but India is the largest dollar value wise. But we know what has happened in EdTech, for example, in India, right? And almost every solution we have built has been not a world-class solution, to be honest. It has been serving the need, but it is not something you can export to the whole world. But everybody knows that AI models, the single biggest users of these AI models are actually the students and teachers. How do you know that? When ChatGPT and these things came out, when schools would close, the usage would drop in the chart. Grammarly, for example, was another company before that, which actually was initially based on GPT. The largest user base is students. So, but where is the world's best edtech solution for it, right? How do you go and make every person maximize their potential? So we try to do that with Fermi. Now, I'm actually very proud to say the approach we took was not like, how do we solve it for India? It was like, how do we solve it for the world? Happens to be in India. Why in India? Because we know what education is like, and it's a leapfrogging mechanism. We recently launched it at BET conference in UK, and we launched it as a global product. And the recommendation, the people on the floor, they sent us mail saying we had not seen any product like this. Now, this is a leapfrogging example. They were who's who of everything over there. But you keep leapfrogging. This is just one example of a vertical.
But I just want to understand from both of you, and we have this issue about, and we talk about it, but everyone's saying there's a lot to do on the, on top of the models in India. You can do a lot of vertical stuff and all of that, but we also have this concern that models are kind of subsuming a lot of the other stuff that can possibly happen. So, I mean, Paras, what do you think I mean, how do you kind of navigate through that uncertainty? Because you could be building something and then, you will have the large models come in.
I think we're a bit blind in that sense. I mean, if you listen to what these frontier model founders are saying, let's say on Dwarkesh podcast, what Dario said, founder of Anthropic, he's projecting trillions of dollars of revenue in next 2 years. Where is that revenue going to come from? They'll just start consuming the applications. I mean, I think they're thinking at a level that we're probably not internalized yet. They're thinking at the level of getting to AGI, and once you have AGI, you have entities like us who are entrepreneurs, and they can simply, I mean, he talks about country of geniuses, right? When you have country of geniuses in a data center, you have a country of entrepreneurs in a data center. Why would they let others capture that value share on their own API? So in some sense, the indicator that AGI has happened
I don't think
is when they'll cut their API access, because they can make those apps themselves and capture that value share, profit share themselves. So and the only way to counter that is to actually invest more in fundamental R&D. So I have no idea why large companies in India give dividends instead of just doing the kind of research that needs to happen. Why do people who've had exits not sort of reinvest into very, very fundamental stuff? That level 0 is what's needed if we need to change things 10 years down the line.
And I mean, we were discussing this. I find it very intriguing that a lot of founders who are first-time founders have exits like, Paras have gone back to mostly becoming investors. So, I mean, how do you kind of solve for that innovation engine? Because it's definitely not happening in our universities, because there the priority is to get a job, after your IIT degree is over. So, I mean, Peeyush, how?
I think this is definitely in current state in India, it is definitely, I feel like we cannot fault these companies for giving dividends, because everybody is pursuing their own interest. So you have to start with the government, that how can the government create an environment where these things actually.
How much do you want the government to be party to this?
Not a whole lot. But by the way, I do not agree with the Anthropic thing either, that trillions of dollars will be captured. When you are raising billions of dollars, you have to go say you'll make trillions of dollars. But the point is,
But they're gunning for it.
Yeah. But they're not the only.
Started saying that they're going to build anything and everything that they possibly can.
Elon Musk very clearly just started macro hard, which is like
and people will. But the question is the assumption that that is the only way money to be made. For example, if you say AGI will come in and will go capture everything, well, how will it become capable of capturing everything? Because they're humans who are doing things, and there's a lot of knowledge in there. The standard practice is then you essentially get that information out of humans and go teach AI. Now, Scale.ai is a good example of a company which actually enabled that and became a huge value. But what can we do to actually, either, like we talk about data localization, but this is like essentially oil being tapped in, right?
Is that something that you're in favor of, Paras? That data from India should be in some way sort of prioritized for people who are building large models here? Is that some way of protecting and not making it a digital colony, as some people say?
I'm not sure how much of advantage that would actually give. Yeah, honestly, because intelligence, I mean, even if you don't give India's data, you could get to higher and higher level of intelligence. I mean, you should think what kind of intelligence you need to create economic value, and whether there is anything unique in quote unquote India's data that will help or create that economic value. I mean, a lot of economic value gets created from software, from innovation, from intelligence, quote unquote. And I think that is just general human phenomena and not necessarily So imagine, even if no model requires, a model doesn't require India's data, but it is extremely intelligent, then we'll end up using the products it creates.
I think that there is.
I think we need to wrap up, but I'll just ask both of you, what is it that India needs to do in the near term to have, you know, a sort of significant presence in whatever is happening in the AI world? Or is that one thing, one actionable thing?
I think it's the mindset thing. We need to shift our mindset from being business people to being mindsets of technologists, innovators, and generally, excited about building the future instead of trying to think where the near-term profit would come from. It's really business versus innovator kind of a mindset. So if you think about Elon Musk, he doesn't have a business mindset. He makes a lot of money. He's the richest person on earth. He doesn't have a business mindset. He has an engineer's mindset. He's a builder mindset, innovator mindset. And I think that's what we require in the Nifty 50 companies, and most of them have that business mindset, not an innovator's mindset.
Yeah, I 100% agree that, and it's also a short-term versus long-term mindset. If there was a concrete thing I would say people should do is look for leapfrogging opportunities. I'll give you a simple example. India is the place where the most random clinical trials in the world happen, is the place which actually builds a lot of drugs and exports to all over the world in generic drugs. But our drug discovery is happening here, and why not, right? We have all the capability of the domain, but we don't have the mindset, and we are not investing in it. There are many such places where we can leapfrog. We can pick vertical by vertical. And I think that will bring the positive momentum, which will create something like this. The mindset will start to shift. People will start to think this is worth doing, and then they will do that.